the Digital Marketing Podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome to the active resistance against bad digital marketing, missold by a seedy underworld of digital agencies to small business owners across the world. Every episode I try to help you clear up the mystery surrounding this digital voodoo that we call digital marketing, as we strip away the geek speak and the sales bullshit you may normally hear to give you clear, accessible answers which allow you to empower yourself with your own DIY digital marketing. This is Digital Marketing Punkcast and I am Digital Marketing Punk. This is episode number 13, unlucky number 13, but fortunately we haven't got an unlucky guest because today we're talking about the power of still imagery on your business website. And this episode, by the way, was recorded in, what month are we? January of 2019. Yes, this is the second episode to go live in 2019 and it's very, very exciting. I have Jack Spedding on the show today. We are talking about, he's a commercial photographer, a very experienced commercial photographer. He's done some fantastic work with a bunch of fantastic clients, and I do recommend that you go and check him out on his website, jackspedding.co.uk, because I think photography, and certainly commercial photography for a website, is one of those underrated things. And I mentioned in the chat that I had with him on the show that I had a conversation with a client on the very day about a client basically just saying, well, the images don't really convert, they don't bring us any sales, so let's just get rid of them. And that's the worst thing that they could have done. That's the worst idea, because imagery is so powerful. It's interlinked with your branding, your website design. The imagery brings all that together and gives your website life. And that's the importance that I want to get across to everybody today. And Jack, I think, believes the same thing as well. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had today with Jack Spedding. So let's get on with it. This is episode number 13. We're talking about still imagery on a website. Go and check it out. Okay, so joining me today, I have Jack Spedding with me. How can I put this? You are technically a commercial photographer extraordinaire, I believe is your full title, isn't it, Jack?
That should be on my LinkedIn profile, shouldn't it?
It definitely should be.
I might change that one later on.
Jack, introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? What's your history?
Yes, so Jack Spedding, photographer. I've been a photographer for the last 11 years now. Working agency side with some quite big brands. And around 2 years ago, I decided I'd had enough of working agency side. Decided to set my own company up, and since then it's gone from strength to strength.
Excellent, fantastic. So it's fair to say that I've got the right person on for the job about talking about the power of still imagery and photography
would hope
today.
So, wouldn't you? Yeah, you'd hope so.
I would hope so. Yeah. Okay, so I work in an agency. I'm a digital marketer, obviously, and I tend to find I'm banging my head against the wall sometimes, working with clients and working with, clients at the agency side as well, when I'm talking to them about imagery, because their main concern is conversion. I want to drive leads, which is all very well and good, and it's very, very true. But when you try and talk to them about, and it's the same with like designers as well and branding, when you try and talk to them about imagery and photography and the importance of that, they sort of gloss over. So what do you, from your perspective, you've obviously been in this business for a while and you know a lot more about it than me. What do you see about the main issues that people come across when they're thinking about, their website imagery?
Yeah, for me, it's always, no offense to anybody who's called Dave and works in marketing, but it's always Dave in marketing has got a camera so we can do it. And it's just trying to overcome that barrier of it's so vitally important to your professional image that you get nice images. A lot of people sort of use websites such as Unsplash or iStock, etc., etc. But then there's so many other people out there that are using exactly the same image. Like there was one, I think she's called Jen, that had her stock image, and there was HP and Dell using her images at the same time. And you have to think the sort of brand's equity that you want to build up, you can't be doing things like that for your own professional image. And people at the moment, rightly so, are going the video way. But again, people are doing it's the amount of phone shots you see on LinkedIn at the moment. And is that the way you want to portray your business? Everybody thinks, oh, I've got an iPhone, I can do my own photography. And maybe it looks great on your iPhone, but as soon as you want to blow that up on your website, or if you want to spread exhibitions or anything like that, as soon as you try blowing it up, you get caught out very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. What do you think are the main, when you must obviously search around on the web often, presumably in your line of work, you obviously see a lot of businesses, and whether it's B2B or B2C, website imagery on there. What really grinds your gears in terms of the things that you sort of come across and you go?
Yeah. Well, a lot of my work is interior and architecture, so I do a lot for construction companies, property development, and that kind of thing. And what grinds my gears is wonky walls. I cannot stand it. It's everybody thinks you just put the widest angle lens on and shoot, make it look as big as possible, and it just makes your building look drunk. And it's that kind of attention to detail that you get from a professional photographer, where everything looks straight, and somebody will look at it and think that looks right. Whereas you look at something that hasn't been shot by a professional who doesn't necessarily have that eye, and you look at it and you're thinking, what's wrong with that image? And every second your client is thinking, what is wrong with that image, is a second that they're not sort of reading your copy, or they're not going further into your website. It's just little subliminal things like that that can convert one of your clients into a paying customer.
Absolutely. It's funny that you bring up property, because one of my sort of key client bases is property, letting agents, estate agents, property auctions and things like that. And photography is really key for them, and they don't seem to understand that. And the worst thing, and the real thing that grinds my gears, is consistency in photography. When you're going from one property to the next, you see photos that are different sizes, and because of the way the website works, like you were mentioning before, it stretches them and distorts them. And, you're trying to sell this product, you're trying to sell this property, and not having that consistency and professional finish to photography is really damaging, not just your ability to sell that property, but your ability to sell yourselves as, the leading person, estate agent in the market of selling a property.
Yeah, definitely. For the sake of whatever it'll cost them, a couple of £100 or whatever, if you're selling a property that's worth sort of £200,000 plus, you think of that as 0.1% of what that property is actually worth. The amount of return that you could get extra on top of that from having professional photography, it will add thousands and thousands of pounds to a property, or get more people into, say, if you're on business centres, that kind of thing, having professional photography for places like that, or property developers who are maybe selling off-plan and doing quite a few, like they'll build the first apartment, say, and then the rest of them will be sold off-plan. If the first apartment looks rubbish, you aren't going to sell the rest of them. So photography is also a great way for a lot of property developers to release funds, to sort of get onto the next stage, allowing them to complete a little bit sooner. They can then get onto the next project, because if they're on site for, say, a week longer because their photography is poor, how much is that going to cost them? It probably run into hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds by the time it adds up. And it's these little things that often are missed quite easily while you're on site. Everybody might look at your day rate and think, oh, that's a little bit. But if you sort of sell it as, actually, I'm saving you a week at the end of this because you're going to sell it quicker, even sort of the cost of the interest or whatever, it's going to save you money in the end. It's sort of an investment, and it's just getting that through to your clients that's going to hopefully sell it a little bit better.
While we're on the topic of property, then, because I know a few people in the industry that listen to this show are in the property sort of area.
Right, cool.
What do you think makes great interior property shots? What is it? Obviously, it takes a lot of experience to get to that, but what is it that makes that so special, from having your photo taken on an iPhone that you've just done because Joe the estate agent's gone around with his iPhone and taken pictures, to actually selling something on the website? What is it?
Cool. This is where I'm going to plug my blog a little bit. If you go to Jack Spedding, which is jakspedding.co.uk/blog, there's quite a few different tips and stuff on there, especially for estate agents. I've done quite a few over the last month on estate agents and interiors. But for me, whenever I go to a new site, I'm looking to get a few different range of shots. You want your wide shot. Everybody wants your wide shot, but don't lie too much. I think most people have got the story where they'll turn up to a property on the website. It looked absolutely huge. They get there and you can't even, swing your cat sort of thing. So first off, don't lie. That's a life choice, a life lesson rather, not just a thing.
It is a life choice as well, don't lie.
Yeah. But then you also want to create some little vignettes as well. So sort of try and tell a story. So put on maybe a 50mm lens, which is more equivalent to the human eye, and just set up some little scenes so that whoever's looking at the image can sort of imagine themselves there. If you can imagine yourself in a building or in a property before you've even gone to see it, it sort of sets up this little story in your mind of, I could work there, I could live there, etc., etc. And it's just putting your client in that property before they even got there, and that could help them have a positive impact before they even got to the property.
Amazing, awesome. Student lettings are usually the worst for this. I know that from experience, because they tend to take the properties while there's already students in them, and the place is a mess. There are beer bottles everywhere. There's other things that you certainly shouldn't be seeing in the public view on tables, and they're the absolute worst for it. It's really interesting today because I had a conversation with a client. I was on a conference call, and I obviously knew that we were doing this interview today, and I had a conversation. It's about a new website, okay? And they are they're a clinic, a weight loss clinic, essentially in Scotland, and they have a website, a currently existing website, and they're basically their banner image on their homepage, that massive image which you can have by choice if you want to, was terrible. It's awful, and I told them so. Because that's the kind of guy I am. But I told them it was terrible, and they said, "Well, we agree with you. It's terrible. It's awful. But it's imagery. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't convert anything. So let's just get rid of it." And I'm going, well, that's a complete misunderstanding of the point. Why is that a complete misunderstanding of the point? Why should you just not get rid of imagery and do away with imagery, just because it's not, just because it's not creating conversions, just because it's not driving conversions for you?
Yeah, well, without getting too geeky into all the stats, your brain can read images certainly thousands of times quicker than it can read copy. So if you want to get someone's attention really quick, the best way to do it is an image. Their brain will catch on to what it is, they'll read it sort of hundreds of thousands of a second quicker than if you're trying to put it in words. The old adage of a picture tells 1,000 words, etc., etc. It definitely works. That's outside of the fact that Google loves images. If you can put images on there and you can alt tag them, Google will absolutely love you for things like that. So getting rid of images on your website it's just, yourself, it's a terrible, terrible idea.
Oh yes, absolutely. I couldn't quite believe I was hearing this conversation say, we're just going to get rid of it. We're just going to get rid of the banner, and that'll be it. We'll just get straight into the words and the content. He said, I had to explain to him that this, like you just said, that image says, can give 1,000 words, and you can compute more emotive feelings faster and quicker than you can with an image than through words. And as long as you get that image right and you can portray a message so much more quickly just through an image, and it'll be all subconscious and it'll be subliminal. If you're not relating that image correctly to the message of what you're trying to achieve through your business, then it's going to be completely wrong. Okay. How do people engage and interact with images on a web page? I think this is a confusion that a lot of people have. They sort of just go, well, I know we need images, I know we need pictures, and I know we need photography, but what does it actually mean? What does it actually do? So how do people interact with images on a web page?
Well, it's very different depending on what you're selling. There's three main things that people are attracted to. Babies are the main one. Pretty women and pretty men basically are the main thing. So if you can get people in your images, so for example, going back to the property adage, if you are doing property, if you can get people in the images, I don't mean sort of Jeff the letting agent sat on the sofa. I mean, if you can get some really nice sort of images that you can use across a range of properties, so almost a bank of images that you can use and say, as like, this is the living area, so especially for things like student accommodation, where a lot of them are going to be very similar layout, and there may be just a little bit that changes. Things like that, where you might spend a little bit more on, say, getting a full day together. Stuff like that, it just ups the value of it. When you think of, say, Airbnb, and you go on Airbnb, there's a range of photographers that may shoot their images. But from personal experience, you supply them your images and they all get treated exactly the same way. So their branding, it may pop up on Facebook down the side, and instantly I know what's Airbnb, and that's just from their photography. So having sort of your own branded style of photography, if you will draw people back to your website, and they may see it on an advert, and they don't need to see it's X estate agent or X whatever. They will know it's you from that. Nike were great with this last year with the Colin Kaepernick advert. They weren't even putting their own branding on it, but you knew it was a Nike advert from what they were doing. They took a massive, well, everybody thought they did take a massive gamble, but they knew exactly what their client wanted. And it 10 days after that, they'd made £3.5 billion just off the good use of photography, because they knew exactly their client base. They knew exactly what they're aiming for. That's one of the major things, is knowing your client and knowing what images will resonate with your client as well. You don't just put anything on there. Don't just go on Unsplash and find some cats and stick them on there because people like cat images. You need to know what's going to work for your sort of target demographic and tailor it to them. Is the way I'd go anyway.
No, absolutely. I think you're right, and I think one of the key things that you said there that really resonated with me was, you can make photography, a style and a type of photography resonates so much with your brand. You mentioned Airbnb, and that's really interesting, because I never thought of that before, that you can see a photograph regardless of, well, obviously it matters what it is, but you can see a photograph and go, that's Airbnb branding, just by how that photograph is manipulated, edited. I mean, that's a really interesting point that you make. That's how powerful photography sort of editing can be if you style it all and I suppose brand guidelines, isn't it? And do it in that way. That's really interesting, actually. Yeah,
it's a little bit scary how easily your mind can sort of be tricked, that you get to a point almost where you don't need the text. I suppose it's like you see the swoosh of the Nike. It's getting your photography to a point. Obviously, you're not going to get to the level of Nike overnight, but it's getting your photography to a standard where people can look at it and say, oh yeah, that's X company, and it's them before you even have to read into it. And it's, as long as you've got a positive brand image around all that, people see your photography and sort of be drawn to it a little bit because they know what your company's about.
Is stock imagery the enemy then? Is that what we're saying?
I think I have to say it is, yeah. To be honest, I think there is a place for it. There's certain photographers that I've worked with in the past who provide stock images to really specific niches. For example, the nuclear power industry and things like that, where it's not always... they're not always capable to get in and shoot things at the right time. So stock images for things like that, absolutely, that's fine. But stock images, if you are, for example, estate agents, or if you're selling products or anything like that, it's one of those where you're risking. It's similar to sort of monetizing your YouTube channel. There was one, I did some stuff for a bathroom company a few years ago, and they were like, oh, we're going to monetize the YouTube channel. Sorry, I'm going slightly off track here, but it does make sense. And then they were getting, so they monetize, oh yeah, we're going to make some money off the ads that are appearing. But then they've got ads for another bathroom company appearing before their company thing. It's that whole thing where if you don't know who else is using the images, you could be almost promoting somebody else. It could be being used for anything. Absolutely. You could be selling, for example, I don't know, a foster care kind of thing, and then that picture, I'm going a bit lewd here, so apologies, that picture could then be used the next day for a Viagra advert, and if somebody's seen that for your foster advert, and then they see that the next day and it's got a totally different meaning to it, all of a sudden you lose your credibility around that. For the sake of spending a few £100, is the credibility of your company worth it? Is the way I'd go about pitching that.
That could be really, really quite damaging to a brand, I suppose, over a period, having that kind of situation. I do have a question. Obviously, we've kind of established, yes, it has a place. Stock imagery has its place, but so the resolution to that is obviously getting photography of your own, and
yes,
you can do it the DIY approach, which is all very well and good, but the quality, I think it does take a certain eye. It takes a certain amount of skill. It takes, to really to know that product quite well to get that right photography. So what is the difference? And the problem is, the point I'm getting to here is, what's the difference between Joe Blogs the photographer, who says he's a great photographer, and what's the difference between, how do you know you're getting quality photography from a professional photographer?
Yeah, well, to the way I'd probably describe it is, it's similar to a muscle. If you think of your creativity as a muscle, say if you were a runner, for example, you wouldn't go into a marathon without training because your muscles wouldn't be right. So if you're a photographer who's got X amount of years experience or has worked for X amount of people, that creative muscle is going to be slightly bigger, obviously. So you're going to be able to get a better result. You're going to get a better time in the marathon, for example. It's just one of those things where when you are looking for a new photographer, like obviously look through the website, but do sort of bear in mind that's only going to be the best of the best. It's similar to looking at someone's Instagram feed and you see, oh, they're on a yacht today, et cetera, et cetera. And it's that kind of thing where people are only showing the best work. So whenever I'm pitching for a job, I'd always like to meet with a client. So certainly meet with the photographer that you wanted to work with, and just get a nice view, because there is people out there I know that produce exceptional work, but they're an absolute bugger to work with. So it's one of those things of trying to sort of weave in almost the two things. You're going to get better results, obviously, from a professional. Well, you'd hope you get better results from a professional photographer anyway, because that's what they get paid for. But yeah, just make sure you get along with them as well is one of the big things from a creative point of view as well, because you may have different creative outlets as well. For example, you may like a heavily processed image or something which may look nice on Instagram with a lot of filters on there. And if that's what you're going for, you can probably achieve that with a more amateur style thing, so shooting on your phone. But then if you're wanting something which has to go, for example, I caught on a job the other day, and it was all fine, and at the end of the meeting it was like, oh yeah, we need these images to go on an 8 meter by 12 meter side of a building. And then all of a sudden that's like, wow. If you would ask an amateur photographer to try and do that, they would not have not necessarily the technical know-how, but they wouldn't have the equipment. So luckily I'm able to provide that. But it was one of those things where, like, if you hadn't have mentioned that to a photographer and they were maybe not as experienced, and at the end it came to, right, we just need to blow this up 700 times bigger than it actually is, it would have been one of those where it's a little bit of a stumbling block. And obviously a professional's used to those kind of issues, and they can hopefully guide you the right way as well.
I suppose that leads us on to my next question, which is, if someone, a business owner, is looking to get a professional photographer on board, what do they need to prepare for that? What should they get in order and set out, and so that you, as the professional photographer, are able to do the best job you can for them?
Yeah, well, I think a great thing to do is have, again, going back to knowing your customer, is knowing the goal. If, for example, your goal is to convert somebody on your website, it's knowing exactly what images you want before the shoot starts, so that there's not sort of, the worst thing that I always hear is, oh, just turn up and we'll wing it. And it's that kind of thing, like, oh no, from that moment on that it's going to go downhill. Yeah. So get something. To be honest, it's part of the photographer's fault for stuff like that as well. Like if somebody says that to me now, it's like, maybe not. But yeah, it's just getting sort of a shot list together. Like my best clients, they'll send me a shot list, so you know exactly, you can basically have it up on your Mac as you're going through. You'll do a shot list as you go through, and sort of have an idea in your mind at the end how the images are going to be used. So, for example, if they are for social media, if they're for your Instagram, for example, you'll want them square. If they're for print, you're going to probably want them A4 or something like that. And it makes a massive difference to how your photographer should be framing things, and where certain things are placed in the frame of the camera to sort of draw the eye. Is one of the big ones. And that's going back to using the professional as well, because they will know how to, do leading lines. Everybody's been in an art class when they're in year 8 or whatever, and you did that sort of looking down the road, leading lines. And it's just little things like that you'll get from a professional photographer that you probably miss from somebody else.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I think anybody who's looking to bring a photographer on board who just doesn't understand it and doesn't know, and will possibly just expect the photographer to be able to do it all and know it all, and
Yeah,
but there is a certain amount of input that you're going to require to go away and do something. I'm going to fire some questions at you because last week, obviously, we met and we did a lovely little network, and we did two speeches together.
yeah,
And you were fired some really cool questions, which I made a note of because I wanted to ask you on here as well. Which was the first one was, how do you make a boring product and service actually appealing? And which, let's be honest, I have a myriad of clients which have a really boring product, a really boring B2B service. How do you use photography to make that more appealing?
yeah. I think the example at the time was dishwashers, wasn't it? Which was one of those things where if you've got a white, yeah, you've got a white cutout shot. Everybody's got the white cutout shot. It looks boring. Things like that. I'd always be pitching for a lifestyle set. If you can put, it's going back to what people like. If they can see a person in the shot, instantly it's more relatable. You can see sort of scale and that kind of thing. So for a really boring product, I suppose, introducing extra things like people and putting in a lifestyle environment, that kind of thing, just adding a little more panache, I guess. That's a word I've never used before in my life. Hopefully I never use it again. It's just going to sort of lift your images a little bit more. There's certain things that the human brain is drawn to as well. So, for example, the one I had in my talk last week was having people looking at things can draw people's eyes to them. People, for some reason, like looking at circles. Red is also a good colour for drawing people's eyes. So it's just knowing all these little things that can sort of draw somebody's eye in. Maybe you've got a product where, for example, I'm trying to think of something where for example, it's a car. It's just a normal car, but you want people to look at the wheels, and it's just sort of adding something around that area that will draw someone's eye, because naturally they're going to be drawn to a circle. If you can add something, maybe a hint of red somehow to it, people will be drawn to that area. Almost you'll ignore the rest of the car, and you'll be looking at that wheel, and it's sort of not lying to somebody, but it's using your creativeness subjectively to draw people's eye around an image. It's really good for a lot of the interiors and stuff that I do. I'll put a person walking through a scene, and naturally your brain will think, oh, where's that person walking to? And you'll follow the line of that person. You might ignore everything else that's going on around it, but all of a sudden a shot of maybe a street that was quite boring for a property developer, if you've got a person walking through it that's got a little bit of blur or something like that, all of a sudden it looks a little bit better. Or if you've got a car going through it and that kind of thing, it just adds a little bit of life to it. So adding people is the best way that I can see to any kind of scene. It'll just make it a bit more relatable for people.
That's a really good point. I like that a lot. Just adding life to that image can really bring the image to life. It's self-fulfilling, I suppose. It really is powerful. I was thinking when you were saying when you were talking about sort of products before, you do get, I think about technology products like, gaming laptops, for example, or mobile phones, I suppose, particularly. We have products which are essentially, certainly with mobile phones, they're big black rectangular blobs of plastic, and but you can take imagery in such a way which essentially almost makes it sexy, and that's by having, what is that? Is that just by having that abstract viewpoint of it?
Yeah, a lot of it's sort of, I used to do a lot for a PC company, and the thing that they knew about this red thing, so I'd always put, for example, a red LED light inside the computer, and you'd be drawn to that, and it's just making sort of an abstract, almost an image within the product, if that makes sense. Apple are really good at things like this. Like, you'll go on the website and you'll just see a corner, a curve of the iPhone, and it's that kind of thing where you're looking at it and you're thinking, it almost makes your brain think, oh, what's that? So you'll go a little bit further, and then you'll get a little bit more. It keeps you scrolling, keeps you on the page, sort of not giving everything away at once, and it just keeps you sort of attracted to it for a little bit longer. So your brain's working out, oh, what's this? It's almost like a little game, if you will. And people love games, don't they? And if you're giving them sort of a little tidbit each time, They're like, oh, what's this? What's this? They'll keep scrolling. They'll keep scrolling. The longer they're on your page, the more images you've got in there. I'd recommend an image maybe every 70 to 100 words to keep people interested.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll go down, they'll read your image. Hopefully your image is angled in a way that it directs their eye to the copy. So then they'll look at the image will lead their eye to the copy, they'll read the copy. Right, I've read that. They'll scroll down a little bit further. Your next image, that leads them to another bit of copy. And it's just sort of guiding your customer down the page or through a brochure and things like that. That's another, when we're going on a rant here, when we're going back to things that annoy you.
No, go for it.
If you've got, for example, if you've got a brochure, don't have anybody looking outside of the brochure. For some reason, you'll look at this person, go back to Joe Blogs again, he's having a hard time today. But if he's looking outside of this brochure, your client's eye will all of a sudden look outside of the brochure, which is exactly what you don't want to do. If you can have that person looking in, they will follow his eye line, they will go to the copy, they'll go to the next page, they'll get on the next page, and the next page will turn over another image sort of leading line into something else. And it's all about just using your image, similar to the way sort of classical painters would lead you through a painting. It's just getting that sort of leading your client through it very gently. They won't even know it's happening, which is quite horrible, but it's just sort of leading them on that path and guiding their eyes where you want them to go.
That's really good advice and really interesting. I'm just thinking of all the examples that I can, and because all this is subliminal, you don't necessarily notice it. You then have this realization of, oh yeah, I saw this thing, and that's exactly what it did, and I didn't even realize it was happening. It's gonna mess me up, to be honest, because I'm never going to be able to look at something the same again.
Apple are really good at it. They'll start you with the edge of it and it's leading down, so you'll scroll down and then the next product will be something else. And the amount of money they've probably put into this with sort of eye tests and stuff like that, knowing where their clients are going to look. Obviously, the marketing budget probably isn't going to be as big for a lot of companies, but it's just knowing how you can control where your viewer is looking at that time can convert a lot of sales.
Let's talk about social media for a second, because I think this is obviously key. We have some massive, photograph social media platforms, and obviously Snapchat is one, and Instagram is a massive player at the moment. It's only getting more popular. Pinterest is one that's always been on the sidelines, but we know that it is powerful and it does a lot. What is it about social media, and what should we be thinking when we're thinking about the photography for social media in particular?
Going back to sort of what you want out of your photographer, have in mind, for example, if something is for Facebook or if something is for Instagram or for Pinterest, like for example, Facebook is going portrait now. So you're shooting portrait. A lot of the video, they're trying to force that way as well. If you're putting portrait video on Facebook, they're going to give you a little bit of a bump in the algorithm. So having things that are portrait fits in, for example, with your Instagram stories, your Facebook stories, your Snapchat. Pinterest loves things in 4:3 ratio. So shooting things almost in a way that you can use them for multiple social media channels is the way to go. If you know you've got something which you need portrait, but then you put exactly what you want in the middle of that, so you can then copy square for Instagram. Then you get a lot of use out of one image. So if you're looking at a day of photography and you're thinking about the price of it, you can almost look at that and think, oh, actually that can cover me across 5 different sort of social media platforms, and that gives us this one day to promote that, and then the next day you do exactly the same thing. And it's producing content specific to that platform as well. Like, don't try and sort of squeeze in a square shot onto Pinterest, because Pinterest doesn't like square images. It's just knowing there's plenty of templates out there. You can drop your templates into Photoshop or whatever, where you'll get a little guide over and it'll show you exactly what they want. Because if you aren't providing images in the right size, then they're going to mark you down. Most photographers, I have actions in Photoshop where at the end, if I know a client, for example, needs it for Instagram, they need it for Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram stories, etc., they're all ever so slightly different, which is really, really annoying. But you can just set up an action and literally click the action, saves it to all these different formats, and then you know everything is exactly how that platform wants it to be. Because to them, they want to keep their audience on the platform. They don't want you sort of going off the platform, keep clicking a link or anything like that. They want to keep you on there. But yeah, it's just annoying that everyone's got their own separate idea of what the right image size is.
They don't make it easy for you, do they? Let's be
No.
honest. Okay, Jack, what if you had to give any hints, tips for people trying to improve imagery on their websites, onto their business websites, regardless of what they're trying to sell, their product that they've got, what wisdom from all of your years, which you have built up over this time, what wisdom would you give to them?
Hire me.
Nice.
No, outside of that, I'd ignore a lot of people. If you go on forums, etc., there's a lot of what I call pixel peepers on there. So everybody says you need the latest and the greatest gear, etc., etc. Ignore that. If you were looking to start out and get your own equipment for a small business, the most important thing for me is a tripod. Mm-hmm. So get a good tripod, and then your lens, and then the camera is probably the last thing. You obviously need one, but it's probably the last thing that would be on my shopping list in terms of what I was spending money on. Mm-hmm. To be honest, most people who are shooting for social media, you don't need the most current camera. Anything that's got 12 megapixels or above is going to be absolutely perfect. Yeah. All the marketing jargon that we're told, you need 50 megapixels and your iPhone's got 7 cameras built into it. You don't need it at all.
They'll scale them down anyway and squash them down through compression anyway, don't they?
Yeah. I've got a few clients where they want to shoot 4K video and that kind of thing. Then you put it on YouTube and you spent a day grading it and you put it on YouTube and it's just grainy. It's that kind of thing. But yeah, just avoid all the hype around gear. Like my camera that I've got in front of me now, which is my sort of main camera, which has got bits hanging off it, the 1DS Mark III. I think it's maybe 12 years old. Wow. And it does an absolutely perfect job. It's carried on plodding on all the way through uni and all the way through my professional career. And until it dies, it's going to stay. I'm looking at it longingly now, like, please don't die. But yeah, you can get plenty of good sort of second-hand cameras. You don't need the best equipment out there. Just start small. Get your lens right. Get your lighting and that kind of stuff right is the best way to look at it, and then build on it from there.
I'm going to ask you a question, which I think I'm going to know the answer to already after you've longingly looked at your camera. But do you ever think, this is a personal question for me really, but do you ever think we're going to get to a place where cameras in mobile devices are ever going to have that parity between the larger, the larger cameras that you can get?
No.
Nope.
Simply because of sensor size. It's going to be fine for your social media, etc., but the sensor size that's in your camera, if you think, I'm just looking at the back of my iPhone now, maximum across, it's maybe 5 millimeters. So the amount of light that's hitting that sensor is so small compared to what's hitting the size of, say, a 35mm camera or a medium format camera. So it doesn't matter how many megapixels are, say, on this tiny little sensor. It's all crammed in. It could be a 12 megapixel camera, but because it's all squeezed onto such a small sensor, it's not going to be able to get you the quality that you need, especially if you're blowing prints up or if you want the best quality images on your website. Unless you're going to get a sensor which is half the size of your phone, which I don't think
it's going to happen. No.
Yeah. Fingers crossed anyway.
I know I said last question, but you keep intriguing me with things. I looked through your website, and which I always do with every guest that I have on. But you have worked with some really awesome brands and clients, which is quite phenomenal. So you gave the answer, hire me. I mean, if you can, I'd definitely recommend it, because you have the back catalogue to back that up. What I did notice is, let's just one point, which is about corporate headshots, which is obviously one of the services that you provide. And why is that so important to business clients and business people? Why? What's the importance with a corporate headshot?
Yeah, well, to put the question back on yourself, if you, for example, added me on LinkedIn and the image you saw was of me out with my mates with a beer, which everybody has seen that kind of person on LinkedIn, and then you've got the next person you go along, Jack V2, and he's sat there and he's got his commercial headshot, which you can tell he's obviously spent a little time on, a little bit of money. Who would you rather be talking to?
Absolutely. No, there's a no-brainer there. It's the professional headshot.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that kind of thing of just getting the right what's the word I'm looking for? The right sort of perceived value in what you provide. If you are, for example, if you are not talking down to them, but if you're a tradesman, for example, they maybe wouldn't expect you to have a professional headshot as it was a professional headshot, maybe on a white cutout. So things like that is getting somebody on the job with the tools. So you can still have a commercial headshot, if you would, in inverted commas, but you would be more on the tool. So it's more showing what you do. It's sort of getting your personality through as well in that shot is a great way to show what you do. So for people who are working in construction, if you can show you doing something, it could just tell a little bit more in that picture. It makes people want to click your profile and just have a little bit look, oh, what's this guy up to?
I like that idea, having people in situ, because you do see a lot, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think first impressions are really, really important, especially when you're saying, we connected on LinkedIn. The first thing, before I even read your name, that comes up next to it, the first thing that I'm going to look at is going to be your photograph, because my eye is going to be instantly drawn to it.
Yeah, definitely.
I believe, if I'm not very much mistaken, you're wearing a red jumper on yours, and I can see,
Yeah.
I don't know whether that was a conscious effort.
Yeah, it's not an accident. I'll tell you. It's one of those things where LinkedIn puts your photograph first, your name second, your job title third. So the first thing that people are looking at is your photograph.
Yeah,
they're going to make the decision on that first sort of a thousandth of a second. What's this person look like? Scroll past before they've even looked at what you do or what value you could be adding through your little tagline. They've made that decision already. Do I want to deal with this person? And if your image isn't correct, they've already made the decision not to deal with you.
Absolutely. That is really, really important. I like the in situ idea. I think the in situ, you can have a corporate headshot in sort of inverted commas, a corporate headshot, and have them in situ, because as long as it's well done and well made, if anything, that only can make people perceive you in a better way. I like that. That's a really cool idea. So
it works a lot for surveyors and stuff like that. If you have them on site, just showing what they do, a little bit of a building in the background, that kind of thing. It just sort of ties the whole idea of what they do together without having to sort of scream at people. I do buildings, etc., etc.
I really like that idea, Jack. It has been really, and I said this to my partner, I said it, I believe I said it to you. I hope I did. Otherwise, it was very rude of me. When we met last year, and you did that talk last week. It's been super interesting talking to you. You have opened my eyes quite considerably to the imagery, and I already thought I knew quite how powerful imagery could be, but you've opened my eyes a little bit more to that.
Cool.
Which has been really awesome. So thank you so much for coming onto the show. Just before you go, just let people know where they can find you, how they can connect with you, what it is that what are you working on, anything at the moment?
I have got my own podcast, which hopefully we'll be able to get you on the future. That would be Creative Crossover.
Well, thank you. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah, cool. And the best place to connect with me that I'm most active is probably Twitter. I'm at Jack Spedding, which is just JAKSPEDDING across absolutely everything. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. I'm not particularly active, which is exactly what I'm telling my clients to be. You need to be more active on Instagram, But yeah, Twitter's probably the best place to connect with me.
And what's your podcast called?
Creative Crossover.
Oh yes.
So hopefully, what it's bringing is bringing different creative people together and crossing over ideas, how we can sort of help each other out a little bit more. Because one of the things that sort of stuck with me is creatives are quite guarded almost about how they do things, and it's almost certain areas of creativeness are secrets until you're on the inside, and it's just trying to share a little bit of our wealth that's inside our brains.
That's really cool. What was your last podcast about?
The last one was with Paddy McGrath, he's a brand guideline guy. It's very different. When you say brand guidelines, it almost sounds quite boring, doesn't it? But when you've met him, totally different. It's all sort of on the soul and how you can sort of get your branding through with through your logo and things like that. He's very, very good at sort of getting on the inside of his clients' brains and sort of pulling out things that they weren't necessarily aware was what they wanted to talk to their client about. It all goes back to that knowing your target audience, and that sort of ties together with how I do it. It's sort of getting your goals down first, and then getting everything else behind that. Because you may come to me, for example, be like, oh, we need photographs for this. And it may be that photography isn't what you need. And I'm not one of the people, I'm not scared to say, actually, photography isn't what you need. Maybe you need video to portray this. I'd much rather a client had a positive experience of photography as a whole, and I make a few extra quid. Because it's just looking after each other a little bit more.
Absolutely. Creative crossover. Go and check out the podcast. That sounds really good. I'm going to check it out. I keep meaning to go and check it out, but haven't yet. I'm going to apologize up front to you in person right now. I'm sorry.
Not good enough. It's not good enough.
I will. I swear. I'm going to subscribe right now.
I like that.
Go and check it out. Jack, thank you so much for coming onto the show and joining me today. It's been really, really interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to Jack for coming onto the show and talking about photography. I don't know about you, but I know that having that conversation really opened my eyes to the power that can become from just using the right imagery, the right quality of imagery on a website is really, really powerful. It's sometimes just completely disregarded, and that's entirely the wrong thing to do. You should be thinking about the imagery you use, not just on your website, but within your content, within your social media. It can be really, really powerful. And certainly these days, the social media and Instagram and all that kind of stuff is becoming more powerful. So I hope it's given you pause for thought. I would love to hear your questions, your queries, your feedback about the show, about what me and Jack talked about before. Don't forget, you can get in contact with the Punkcast by emailing us at punkcast@digitalmarketingpunk.co.uk. You can also connect with me across all social media. You can find me on facebook.com/digitalmarketingpunk. You can find me on Twitter at punk_digital. You can find me on Instagram at digitalmarketingpunk as well. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, by far the place where I am most probably talkative. Just by searching Digital Marketing Punk, I will appear before your very eyes. It'd also be great if you wouldn't mind, if you've enjoyed the show today and you've enjoyed other shows before, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Digital Marketing Podcast. And if you really like it and you really enjoy it, why don't you tell me and show me your appreciation by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes? That would be really, really awesome. I hope you will join me on the next episode of the Digital Marketing Podcast. Until then, I hope you have a good January. See you later.